Okay, so first lesson, characteristics of life. And I always start with a little intro here on what is biology. So bio is a root, which means life. And then ology is a study of. And in class at some point, I am going to actually give you a Latin Greek roots cheat sheet. I just haven't done that yet. I feel like we need to kind of get a flow of the year and see how these things are going to go in the hybrid. And then I'll start with that. But again, bio means life. Enology is the study of, and then that's the study of life. All science, including biology, is based on inquiry. We're going to use the word inquire a lot. If I was in class with you and I said, what is inquiry? A lot of you in the classroom, it's like crickets. No one raises their hand, and all I hear is the sound of the humming of the air conditioner. And it's basically inquiry is asking questions, okay? And so biologists, when you're studying biology, this is not like geo. So my honors kids, if you're coming from thinking like sixth grade science, like earth science, this biology is the study of life, everything living. My kids who are 10th graders and coming from geo-environmental, this is nothing to do with rocks or the sun. So non-living things down here in the corner, and I'm going to use my cursor when I do this a lot, so you got to watch the screen, are your abiotic. When you throw a in front of a word, it means not. Bio means life, and so this is not living. Rocks, the sun, the moon, water, soil, air. I can't think of any. Water. I think I already said that. And then living things interact with these non-living things. So the living things are your biotics. These are two new vocab words, which we will chart down in your little binders, or not binders, but books you're going to have. Bio means life. So biotic means living. So that would be like the penguins, who are standing on the abiotic feature of the ground. Can one exist without the other? No, they cannot. You cannot have living things without non-living things. Non-living things could exist, but living things need non-living things to survive. So an organism is something that displays all the 8 characteristics of life. An organism is a complete and entire living thing. I've been using these pictures for years. Years. I just think it works well. I know it's goofy and it's god-awful looking, but it's a poinsettia. It's a plant. You might see it around the holidays, okay? And if you're talking about an organism, you have to look at the entire thing when you're looking at the 8 characteristics of life. You can't take a leaf, pull it off, and say, is this living? Well, it was a piece of the living thing, but it itself would not be considered an organism. It'd be biotic, okay? Even if it was dead, it'd be considered biotic because it was once living. So abiotic does not mean dead. So a dead squirrel in the road is not abiotic. It is a deceased biotic being, a deceased biotic thing, okay? The thing that died that was once living. And so this is not an organism, but the whole thing, when you're looking at it, when you're going to look at these 8 characteristics of life, is you got to look at the whole entire living thing. Now, I always start the year off with showing kids a little quick clip. So I'm going to show it to you here, and you're going to be forced to watch it. Here we go. While you're watching it, because I know you're going to be like, why am I watching this? So while you're watching this, you have to decide what is going on in the video to prove to you that the something that you're seeing is indeed alive. So, for example, what did that flower just do? That's right, it moved. So could movement or growing be a characteristic of life? Could that prove it's alive? Maybe make a list while you're watching this peaceful little clip. That's a hummingbird. Again, what are these creatures doing to show you characteristics of life? Remember, to be living, you don't have to be an animal. You can also be a plant. That's a honeybee eating nectar. That's pollen flying around. Pay attention to the strawberry. What's it doing? What's the orange doing? What's the sweet pea doing? What's the flower doing? That's a bat. So I'm going to head back to this PowerPoint. And in years past, I would ask the kids then to give me all their answers. What did you see? Which is evidence. That's something you saw. You can't get evidence unless you see something. And then I asked them for an interpretation, which would be something that they were giving me that usually corresponded to a characteristic of life. So it was understanding that everything they were seeing with the living things was actually a characteristic of life. And we can go through here, like the strawberries got larger and changed to red, which is growing and developing a characteristic of life. The hummingbird was getting food with its long beak, requiring energy. The spider was attacking, which was responding to potential food or responding to a stimulus. The butterfly crackled out of its cocoon, that's its cocoon, not raccoon, which would be growth and development. The bat was screeching with echolocation for its response factor. So again, a stimulus to response. I'm going to jump down to here, the flower blooming, response to a stimulus, but that could also be, when it blooms, growing and developing. The butterflies were attached together at one point. That's reproduction. And so this would just be some way to go through and do a little preview, which you just did, to look at some characteristics of life. So the definition in the textbook, which we're not using this year unless I put it up online with the screenshots of the pages, tells you that the 8 characteristics of life, the definition of life, of an organism, is it's made up of units called cells, which you've learned about in 7th grade. All living things are based on a universal genetic code, which is DNA. All living things obtain and use materials and energy, like food, water. They grow and they develop. And does anyone know what the difference between growing and developing is? So to grow is to gain an increase in your size, and to develop is to age over time, and to maybe come from a chrysalis into a butterfly, or a cocoon, if you want to call it that, or a caterpillar into the cocoon, and then into chrysalis. Tadpoles and frogs. All living things reproduce. They respond to their environment, which is a stimulus in their environment. They maintain a stable internal environment. This is my favorite one, homeostasis. You could have actually seen this in the video. Homeostasis was being maintained when they were eating. It goes along with energy. Homeostasis is being maintained, when they are trying to defend their territory or find a mate. They're just always maintaining their internal balance to make sure that they indeed survive. Homeostasis would be if they're trying to get shelter, so that they're not so cold if it's a reptile, or to gain warmth so that they can get warmer, or so that they can hide so that they're not so warm if it's a reptile. And then last but not least is all organisms change over time. The word change simply means to evolve, and evolution in its simplest form is just basically natural selection, okay? So I'm going to quickly go through the first 4 characteristics of life here. And so all living things must be made of cells. When you come into class, we're going to put these 8 characteristics into your composition notebook, or into your little spiral notebook. So cells can be one cell. The uni prefix means one cell. An example of a one-celled organism is, that's right, bacteria. Multicellular means many. Multi means many. And your multicellular organisms can be like seals, humans, large plants, even algae. Trees are many cells, pandas, which is my favorite. And your cell is the basic unit of life. All living things have to start with a cell. Second characteristic of life, and these are not in any order, so you don't have to go through a checklist, okay, is a universal genetic code. So a universal genetic code is DNA. So DNA is a molecule that stores the information that organisms need to grow and reproduce. It's housed in the nucleus. It has the adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine. You're probably like, oh. Those are the letters that make up DNA. There's a poster in my room. And you pass that on from generation to generation, parents to offspring. And guess what? DNA can mutate. So if you look at the picture here, and I'm going to actually discuss this one in class, the frog, if you want to look at it, does anyone notice what's wrong with the frog? It has multiple limbs. And so multiple limbs can sometimes be a positive adaptation. It depends on how you look at it. And it could be a negative. We'll do one of these in class, okay? Now, I'm going to pause here. So if I found an organism, okay, and I just kind of like smacked it down in front of you, okay, and I'm like, figure out if it's living, because I found it in my yard last night. It's pretty gross, and I don't want to touch it and like look at it, so I'm going to put it on you. So how would you figure out if it had cells? Like, what would you do to it? Okay, hopefully you chose the microscope. So what would you do to figure out if it had DNA? Okay.